The night felt heavier than usual. Rain lashed against the windows, a rhythmic, almost hypnotic sound that should have been comforting. But it was not. The house was silent. Too silent. Everyone had gone to bed hours ago, yet a strange unease wrapped around me, squeezing tighter with each passing second. I stood in front of the mirror, running a towel through my damp hair. Droplets clung to my skin, cooling against the night air, but there was an unsettling warmth pressing down on my chest. The dim glow from the bedside lamp flickered slightly, casting elongated shadows across the room. Something about the way they stretched and shifted made the space feel different, smaller, closer. I pulled my robe tighter around myself, the soft fabric doing little to chase away the cold creeping up my spine. Then I noticed it. The door. It was open, just an inch, barely enough to notice. But I knew I had shut it. I was sure. A slow, sick feeling curled in my stomach. Had I forgotten? Or had someone... My breath caught in my throat. The air in the room shifted. The weight of being watched, the sensation of not being alone. It clung to me like a second skin. I was not imagining this. I took a step forward, my heart a drumbeat against my ribs. The wooden floor was cool under my bare feet as I reached for the door. My fingers barely brushed against the handle when... a movement. A shadow. Subtle yet unmistakable. A presence just beyond the doorframe. I stopped breathing. Then, he stepped inside. My stepson. The sight of him sent a jolt through my veins, like ice water dumped over my head. He should not be here. He was supposed to be asleep in his own room. But he was not, and he closed the door behind him. Something inside me screamed. The silence was deafening. I gripped the robe tighter, my knuckles white. "What are you doing here?" My voice barely came out, strangled by the fear crawling up my throat. He did not answer. He just looked at me, not the way a son looks at a mother. Something was wrong. His eyes dragged over me, slow, deliberate, calculating. It was the same look I had caught before, the one that made me shift uncomfortably, the one I had always dismissed as nothing. But now, in this moment, I knew. This was not nothing. A slow smirk curled at the corner of his lips. "You look different like this." My stomach twisted. I took a step back. He took a step forward. A single heartbeat stretched into eternity. His eyes never left me. I swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "You should not be here." He ignored me. His movements were unhurried, almost lazy, as if he had all the time in the world. "You are beautiful," he murmured. My blood ran cold. The words slithered into the air between us, thick and suffocating. This was wrong. Every part of me screamed to move, to run, to get out. But my feet felt rooted to the ground, my body betraying me. He took another step. Closer. Too close. I flinched. My pulse hammered against my ribs, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. A dark amusement flickered across his face. He was enjoying this. The room suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in on me. My mind raced. How do I get out? If I ran, would he stop me? If I screamed, would anyone hear? Then, he said something. Something that made my world tilt, my skin crawl, my stomach drop into a bottomless pit. A line had been crossed. There was no mistaking it now. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not innocent. He had been waiting for this moment. My throat went dry. I could not breathe. The floor beneath me felt unsteady, as though the very ground had betrayed me. I tried to speak, to force out words, any words, but my voice failed me, and he knew it. He could see my fear, and he liked it. For the first time in my life, I felt powerless. He tilted his head slightly, watching me as if waiting to see what I would do next, waiting to see if I would break. I clenched my fists, willing myself to move, to react, to do something, anything. "You need to leave," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But he did not. He took another step, closing the last bit of space between us. I flinched, but I did not back away this time. I would not let him win. I said, "Leave." Silence. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. Then he chuckled. A low, mocking sound that made my skin crawl, like I was the foolish one, like this was just a game to him. And that was the most terrifying part of all. Finally, he turned, walked to the door. For a brief second, I felt my body relax, my lungs filling with air again. But then he stopped, hand on the doorknob. Without looking back, he murmured, "You will not tell anyone." A pause. Then quieter, but sharp enough to cut through me like a blade. "No one will believe you." The door clicked shut behind him, and I was alone. Or at least, I should have been. But I did not feel alone. I felt watched, as if he was still standing right there, just on the other side of that door. And deep down, I knew. This was far from over. The door clicked shut, but its sound did nothing to break the weight pressing down on my chest. My breath came in short, shallow bursts, as though I had been running for miles. I could still feel him in the room. His presence clung to the air like a scent that refused to fade. He was gone, but he was not. His words echoed, twisting around me like unseen hands tightening around my throat. "No one will believe you." The sentence rattled through my mind like a broken record, its sharp edges cutting into me over and over again. "No one will believe you." I squeezed my eyes shut. Number. That was not true. My husband would listen. He would believe me. Would he not? But then, a cruel voice inside me whispered something I did not want to hear. If he believed you, would you have hesitated to scream? The thought made my stomach lurch. I had frozen. My voice had caught in my throat. Not out of weakness, out of doubt. Because deep down, I knew. I had seen the way he looked at his son, the way he trusted him without question, the way he dismissed my discomfort as overthinking. I had let it slide before, ignored the signs, told myself it was in my head. And now, I was standing in the middle of my own bedroom, shaking, while my stepson had just walked out, untouched, unbothered, like nothing had happened. I should have screamed. I should have thrown something at him, made noise, fought harder. I should not have had to. The realization made my legs weak. I sank down onto the edge of the bed, gripping my robe so tightly my fingers ached. My entire body was trembling. The rain outside had softened into a quiet drizzle, but my world still felt like a storm. I reached for my phone. My hands were unsteady as I unlocked it, my mind racing. What do I say? How do I even begin to explain this? Your son walked into my room while I was changing, and then he said, I could not even bring myself to type the words. Would my husband get angry? At me? At him? Would he believe me at all? What if I told him, and it changed nothing? The thought alone sent a fresh wave of nausea rolling through me. I had married this man believing he would protect me, that this house was my safe place. And yet, here I was, feeling trapped in the very home I was supposed to feel secure in. And the worst part? I was not sure if the danger was inside my room or inside my mind. A noise outside my door made my body jerk. Footsteps. My heart seized in my chest. For a split second, I thought he had come back. I held my breath listening. The steps faded, moving away this time. He was still awake. A shudder ran through me. The walls between us suddenly felt thinner, weaker, like they could crumble at any second. I could not stay in this room. I needed to get out. I needed air. I stood on unsteady legs, moving toward the window. The cool glass felt good against my fingertips as I pushed it open. A damp gust of wind hit my face, brushing against my damp skin, but it did nothing to cool the heat still burning beneath the surface. The street below was quiet. Cars sat motionless along the curb, their windshields beaded with rain. Somewhere in the distance, A stray dog barked once before the silence swallowed the night again. I closed my eyes. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what to do next. I could not pretend this did not happen. I would not. But at the same time, I could not ignore the way his words rattled inside me. "You won't tell anyone. No one will believe you." He had said it with such certainty, such confidence that it made my skin crawl. How many times had he tested my silence? How many times had I let him? I gritted my teeth, shame and rage colliding inside me. This could not go on. I needed to take control back. I turned away from the window, my mind made up. I would talk to my husband. I would force him to listen. But as soon as I stepped away, a shadow moved in the hallway. My breath caught. The light from the doorway stretched long across the floor, bending around the shape of someone standing just outside my room. Watching. I went still. A moment of unbearable silence passed. Then, a slow, deliberate movement. He was still there. A sharp spike of terror shot through me. I wanted to slam the door, lock it, scream, but I could not show him I was afraid. Not now. I took a deep breath, my pulse thundering in my ears. Then, I forced my voice to be steady. "Go to bed." Silence. I could feel his hesitation, the way he lingered just a second too long. Then, finally, his shadow disappeared. The floor creaked as he moved down the hallway. I listened to his footsteps retreat, my fingers gripping the doorframe so tightly I thought they might bruise. I could not do this anymore. I could not stay here, pretending everything was normal while he roamed freely through the same halls. I needed to leave, and I needed to do it before it was too late. I did not sleep. The night stretched on, endless and unforgiving. Every passing second felt like a weight pressing down on my chest, suffocating me. I sat on the edge of the bed, eyes fixed on the door, waiting, dreading for it to move. He was still out there. I knew it. Even if I could not see him, even if the house had fallen into an eerie silence, he was still there, watching, waiting. The air in my room felt thick, as though the walls were closing in on me. I pulled my knees to my chest, gripping the fabric of my robe so tightly that my knuckles ached. My body was exhausted, but my mind refused to shut down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing in my doorway again. The smirk, the confidence in his voice, the way he had leaned in, whispering words that had poisoned my soul. "You won't tell anyone. No one will believe you." My stomach twisted, bile rising to my throat. How had it come to this? How had my home, my safe place, become a cage I could not escape? Morning came, but the fear did not fade. The sun poured through the curtains, illuminating the room in a soft golden glow. But it felt wrong, deceptive, as though daylight alone could not wash away the horrors of the night before. I had to tell my husband. I had no choice. I could not live like this, trapped, helpless, afraid. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. The moment I heard my husband's footsteps in the hallway, I forced my body to move. I would tell him. I would make him understand. But as soon as I stepped out of my room, he was already there, standing in the kitchen, sipping his coffee, like nothing had happened. My steps faltered. My mouth went dry. I felt my breath catch as he turned to me, and then that smirk. The same cruel, knowing smirk that sent ice through my veins. And before I could speak, before I could say a single word, he did. "I think she's been acting weird lately," he said, so casually, so effortlessly, as if we were discussing the weather. My stomach dropped. My husband glanced up from his newspaper, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, leaning against the counter. "She was up all night, pacing. I heard her walking back and forth. She hasn't been herself." I wanted to scream. He was twisting the truth before I could even tell it. He was planting doubt, weaving a lie so smoothly that even I felt myself doubting my own reality. "Is something wrong?" my husband asked, turning to me now. The words sat on my tongue, heavy and leaden. I could feel them there, ready to burst free, ready to tear apart the silence that had trapped me. But I hesitated. Not because I did not want to say it, because I did not know if he would believe me. Would he believe that his son had stepped into my room while I was changing? Would he believe that his son had whispered things that made my skin crawl? Or would he believe that I was the one being irrational, that I was overthinking things? I could not take that risk. The thought of my husband's eyes filling with doubt, of him hesitating before siding with me, I could not bear it. So I did the only thing I could. I swallowed it. I swallowed the fear, the anger, the truth, and I lied. I didn't sleep well, I murmured, forcing a weak smile. That's all. His face softened. You should rest today, you look tired. I nodded, barely breathing. I could feel his eyes on me. My stepson. I knew that look. Victory. He had won. For now. But not for long. Because I had already made my decision. I had to leave. I had to get out. I spent the rest of the morning pretending, going through the motions like a ghost in my own home. But inside, I was screaming. My hands were steady as I washed the dishes, but my mind was racing. My lips smiled when spoken to, but my heart was pounding in my chest. I waited for my husband to leave for work, waited for the perfect moment. Then, when I was sure I was alone, I grabbed a small bag, stuffing it with the bare essentials. I needed to leave before he realized what I was doing. I needed to get out before it was too late. I zipped up the bag, my hands trembling. Then, taking a deep breath, I stepped into the hallway. And that was when I saw him. He was already there, waiting, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. But I knew what this was. He had been expecting this, blocking my path, smiling. Leaving so soon? The air in my lungs turned to ice. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to be steady. Move. He did not. Instead, he took a step closer, his voice barely above a whisper. You should know. I always get what I want. I felt my stomach twist. The confidence in his tone, the certainty, the ease with which he said it. He believed it. He truly believed I was powerless. He thought I would not fight back. And for a moment, just a moment, I was afraid he was right. But then something inside me snapped. Not this time. I would not let him win. I did not hesitate. I pushed past him, shoving him aside with more force than I thought I had. I ran, down the hallway, toward the front door. I could hear his footsteps behind me, fast, too fast. I was almost free. Almost. My fingers curled around the doorknob, and then a rough hand wrapped around my wrist. Tight, unforgiving. My body jolted as he yanked me back, my breath catching in my throat. I gasped, struggling, fighting, but his grip only tightened. I was not free. I was not safe. And as I looked up into his face, his dark, amused eyes, I realized the worst part of all. This was never about winning or losing. This was about control, and he had just taken it back. I felt his grip tighten around my wrist, his fingers pressing into my skin like a vice. My pulse pounded against his hold, my breath catching in my throat. I twisted, pulled, fought, but he was stronger than I had realized. This was not happening, not like this. I had been so close, the door was just inches away, freedom within reach. But now it might as well have been miles. My mind screamed at me to fight harder, to claw, to bite, to do whatever it took to break free, but then he yanked me back. Hard. The force sent me stumbling, my back colliding with the wall. A sharp gasp ripped from my lips as I felt the impact reverberate through my body. He stepped closer, towering over me, blocking the only exit. My lungs burned with panic. The walls around me seemed to shrink, pressing in, suffocating me. I could not let this happen. Not now. Not ever. You are not going anywhere, he murmured, his voice dangerously low, almost amused, like he was enjoying this, like this was a game. I snapped. Rage, terror, desperation. It all crashed into me at once. and suddenly I was not frozen anymore. I struck, without thinking, without hesitation. My knee slammed into his stomach. He gasped, his grip loosening just enough for me to rip my arm free. I did not wait. I ran. Past him, past the hallway, down the stairs. My only thought was to escape. Behind me, I heard him recover, heard the thundering of his footsteps as he charged after me. Number, I had to make it. I lunged for the front door, hands fumbling with the lock. My heart was hammering so loud I could hear it in my ears. Then, a hand yanked my hair from behind. I screamed, a raw, desperate sound that tore from my throat before I even realized I was making it. I swung my elbow back, connecting with his ribs, but it barely slowed him down. He grabbed at me again, trying to pull me away from the door, trying to stop me. Crash. The lamp, shattering. The sound exploded through the house, shards of glass scattering across the floor like tiny knives. For a split second, everything froze. Then, footsteps. Fast. Heavy. Someone was awake. A door slammed open upstairs. My husband. A voice, his voice, booming down the stairs. "What the hell is going on?" Everything shifted. The power balance snapped in half. My stepson let go of me so fast it was like I had burned him. Panic flooded his face. He turned just as my husband stormed down the stairs, his eyes darting between us, taking in the scene. The broken lamp. The way I stood, breathing hard, terror written all over my face. And him, standing just a few feet away, his hands curled into fists, his entire body rigid with guilt. It was now or never. I told the truth, every single word. I did not hold back. I spoke through the fear, the doubt, the suffocating weight in my chest. I let it all out. The night before, the stares, the whispers, the way he had followed me, cornered me, tried to control me. I watched my husband's face as I spoke, searching for his reaction, praying he would believe me. His expression darkened with every word. His jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists, and then he turned to his son. His voice was dangerously low. "Is this true?" The moment shattered. Panic. I saw it. The flicker of fear in my stepson's eyes. And then, like the coward he was, he ran. Past my husband, past the front door, he bolted into the night. The door slammed shut behind him. And suddenly, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The only sound was my breathing, ragged and uneven, as if I had been drowning this entire time and had finally broken through the surface. I turned to my husband, my entire body still trembling. He was staring at the door, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he turned to me. Something in his eyes broke me. It was not just anger. It was not just guilt. It was realization. That he had failed me. That he had ignored the signs. That he had let this happen under his own roof. That night, my stepson did not return. He disappeared into the darkness, into whatever shadows had raised him into the monster he had become. But was it really over? Because even as I sat there in the wreckage of everything that had happened, I knew. His absence did not mean I was safe. It did not mean he was gone. A part of me would always feel watched. A part of me would always wonder, will he come back? I did not know. But I did know one thing. This nightmare was far from over.